Hi, I'm Dr. Brad. We're continuing a series on Lyme disease. This one's going to be about barriers to healing. So the first barrier is really what's going on in our mind, in our heart. If we look from a Jewish standpoint, they really believe the center of life is in the heart. That's where the spirit is. That's where God wants to dwell. That's where our belief systems come out of. And yeah, I've got a passage here. It's one out of Hebrews. Hebrews is really a very, very deep book. It really is. But it talks about the children of Israel who were coming out of Egypt out of about 430 years of being in bondage down there to come into the promised land. It says, so we see that they were not able to enter into the promised land because of unbelief. And that story is interesting. They were given direction to enter in, and people got afraid of all the giants in the land. They said they weren't going to do it. God says, okay, you're not going to do it. You're going to stay out here till your whole generation dies. And they said, no, we're going to go in with our own strength. And they tried to go in, they got beat up, and they tucked their tail, went back out in the desert, and they died off slowly. But all of us have been lied to in our life. When you take chronic illness, something like Lyme disease, we're all lied to. Most of our caregivers are lied to also, and they're doing the best they can with the information that they have. But the information we're given is full of errors, it's full of lies, it's manipulated, and I'm going to address that a little bit later. But just to let you know, everybody's been lied to. And if we believe a lie, and we accept that as true, it bars us from the pathway of healing. We've got to believe there is a way to overcome this. We've seen hundreds of people go from the most debilitated states to healthy again. And I'm talking people that can't walk, people that can't talk, people that can't think, people that can't work, people that can't get out of bed. And we had one young guy, he was a farm kid, 21 years old. He was in bed 23 and a half hours a day. Been to different caregivers, wasn't getting better, came to us. He didn't do what we did. 2 months later, I'm trying to figure out, well, why is this guy not getting any better? And I finally get him to address what's going on. He wasn't doing what I told him. And it proved to him why he needed to do what I told him. And in a couple of weeks, he started to get outside again. You have to believe that you can get on the other side to have any kind of hope at all. And it really starts there. It really does. So we have to address that up front. Mark Twain puts it this way: it ain't what you know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Every one of us has those things in us. Things that we believe with every core of our fiber. Things we'll defend to our death. That oftentimes aren't true. And we find that out in other times. The lies that keep people from being able to heal are huge. I just want to put that up front. We've got to break through the lies. There is a way to heal and become healthy once again. So we'll open it up with this. We look at this cover article in Business Week of medical guesswork. And the thing that's really amazing with their investigative reporting, it says the portion of the medicine that's been proven to be effective is still outrageously low, 20-25% of the time. Which brings up a really, really good point. Most doctors, doesn't matter of what type they are, medical, alternative, specialists, most expect to be able to help 20 to 25% of the people that come in their office. That's right. 20-25%. A quarter or less of the people that come in. And of that help, that's to slow something down, to stop it, or reverse it. Most just slow something down. A few stop it, and it's really rare for people to reverse it. So this qualifying what that help is. This is an investigative report showing this is a major problem. And then we add to that the misinformation issue. As Dr. Mike Hyman, talking about the issue of spin going on within the research journals that all of healthcare looks at to try and find out what the truth is. 40% of those articles are twisted. It's called spin. Mark Hyman suggests that it's at least 70% in the U.S. And not only does he say, unfortunately, in our healthcare system, business trumps science every time, but the reality is, when you look at this, 75% of the time it's overt fraud. It's not mistakes. It's people that are paid off, paid under the table, trying to manipulate things because there's people that have big vested interests in all this. So that's why I said a little earlier, everybody's being lied to. And if our healthcare givers are lied to about the reality of things, it's a no wonder why the insanity keeps going on. Here's another interesting fact. This is out of JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, that despite the changes been made in the fundamental approach to medical education has not changed since 1910. Yeah, over 100 years. It hasn't changed. Medical education should prepare students for the clinical problems they'll face in their future practice. However, that's not happening for the most prevalent problems in healthcare today. Chronic illness. Go figure. No wonder why things aren't changing a whole bunch. The reason why is all of the healthcare institutions, they study acute illness. Acute illness and chronic illness are different as night and day. There's just really not a lot of similarity between the two. And you can't extrapolate, you can't apply principles for acute illness to people that have chronic problems. It doesn't work. Most people that have chronic problems, Lyme disease chronic problem, they know that, they're frustrated, they go from door to door to door to door, so they're trying to apply a principle that's just not going to work for them. So if we look at the death rates, this really puts things in an interesting perspective. The cause of death in the United States, heart disease, a little over 600,000 a year. Cancer, barely less than that, 584,000, 585, if you were to round that up. Doctors are number 3. The Journal of the American Medical Association prints out articles and says about 245,000 a year. I've looked at some articles that aren't necessarily in real reputable journals that are saying it's closer to 550,000, right next door to cancer. The British Journals of Medicine, they did investigative studies of the statistics in America, and they go, you guys are wrong, you're manipulating the figures. It's 400,000 at a minimum a year. And looking at the statistics, I got some of those drugs, 106,000 a year, infections 80,000, medications 7,000, errors 20,000. One article I looked up said it was like 111,000 a year dying from bed sores, and over 100,000 a year dying from starvation, malnutrition in the hospital. So, it's atrocious. We compare that to chronic respiratory disease, 150,000, accidents, 130,000, strokes, 128,000. You look at the things that people are really, really looking at, nothing compares to these. But, the reality is we have to be fair. Doctors are dealing with a lot more dramatic issues than a lot of your alternative docs are. And oftentimes they're really stressed out, but their statistics aren't doing all that well. And it just means they're not addressing what really needs to be addressed. And you look at alternative care, they might not be killing people, but their statistics really aren't that good as a general whole either. So this is the the article out of the British Medical Journal right here, saying medical error is the third leading cause of death in the United States. It shouldn't be, and this is where everybody's going for care. And it's a pretty great thing. Well, when we look at the secret killer, Time does an investigative report on this. This is another cover article. The secret killer is inflammation. What are the major causes of inflammation? Trauma, toxicity, chronic stress, infection, nutrient insufficiencies. And these are some of the big issues that need to be addressed to start to normalize physiology. So if we look at healing and the ability to heal, we need a whole different model that offers a much more practical solution than what we're using today. And that's the whole purpose of doing some of these, to make this a little bit more known. We need a different model. If anybody's ever looked at the video of Under Our Skin, you come to realize there's a certain way that everybody is expected to function and work, and it doesn't work. Anybody that goes against that grain, they make life pretty miserable for them, or they can. So we really need different models of doing things. And the people are doing the cutting edge breakthrough in these arenas are commonly really hassled in a huge way. So we come back to Mark Twain's quote: it ain't what you know for sure that gets you in trouble. Or it ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. recover itself very quickly like a shell, and say one of the white blood cells is chasing it upstream in your blood. The Borrelia can just go right through the vessel wall, the blood vessel wall, corkscrew itself into the tissues, copy the tissues, cover itself over, and in a very short period of time, the immune system just recognizes it as us because it's got this shell of our proteins over it. When it's threatened, it makes a biofilm, and new research is making it sound like that may just be a general life cycle. It can stay in the biofilms for up to 17 years and break out. They can come in and out of the biofilm and feed. They actually interlace themselves, much like a mat, and create this matrix that goes in it where in things that would come to attack it can't get to it. Antibiotics can't get through the biofilm. Your immune system can't get through the biofilm. It can just stay in there, create its toxins, pollute everything. When those biofilms are fixed, it stays there. If they're floating, that means they're inside of the bloodstream. They've broken loose. It's like an embolus that can cause a stroke, a heart attack, or kill somebody fairly easily. The bacteria communicate inside of those biofilms and multiply readily inside of them too. So we look at some of the things that Nina Zubasek, she says, she was a Lyme liaison from Harvard talking at Martha's Vineyard Hospital. With current testing, 69 out of 100 patients that have Lyme disease can go untreated because the tests are false. Bullseye rash happens only 20% of the time, and it's all over the map on how many times this happens. It's not a very good indicator. As I said earlier, it swims twice the speed of a white blood cell. Doxycycline, this is the biggest one. Doxycycline, it doesn't kill the bacteria. It's only trying to help stop it from multiplying. It's a critical thing to know. This is the Harvard liaison for Lyme disease, letting us know the antibiotics, the number one antibiotic we use, isn't doing what people think. It's not killing the Lyme bacteria. It's trying to keep it from multiplying. It's up to your immune system to try and overcome it. We look at the next thing in Lyme disease. Babesia is, from my own clinical observations, it is the biggest of the co-infections. In many, Babesia is a worse issue than Lyme disease itself. When people are getting high fevers, you can basically figure Babesia is there. If their blood work starts to show irregular blood cells, if they're starting to show some anemia, that's an indication Babesia is there. They just can't find it. The lab tests are terrible for this stuff. When I first looked at Lyme disease, there were around 30 strains of Babesia identified. When I last looked at it several years back, it was over 100 strains. An interesting thing about the Lyme bacteria in light of this, there's 30,000 potential different genetic variations. That's 30,000 potential different strains. How many are out there? It's hard to say. You just keep mutating. Babesia can do the same thing. There are 3 lab tests for Babesia, 2 are illicit tests. Those are the antibody immune assay tests, which are atrocious as far as their accuracy goes. We'll go through that in a bit. And one blood smear. And if you think about it, in a blood smear, 1 drop of blood has about 5 million blood cells in it, something like that. And whenever anybody does a blood smear, the lab technician counts the first 100 cells they see. If they're a third lab, they might do that 2 or 3 counts. Now, the likelihood of finding these parasites in some of those cells is really small, really small. Ehrlichia is the next one. Ehrlichia is a bacteria that invades the white blood cells. So white blood cells, your immune system, Ehrlichia destroys immune function. It's a bacterial parasite. It can live inside the white blood cells that should be killing it. It can live there and last, looking there at least 26 different strains, 2 tests. They were illicit tests. Those tests only get value the first 1 to 2 weeks after infection. Nobody knows they even have it then. If that is incubated enough, and by the time you go in to look at it, there's no accuracy left in the test. But VC is pretty much the same way. Rickettsia, the last look, which was just a little while ago, nobody will give a count on how many strains are in it. I had to count some of the articles out of the governmental sites to see how many strains I could count, and the biggest number I got out of any single article was 23 strains. So that's where I come up with that. This has 2 illicit tests that have somewhat of an accuracy in the first 1 to 2 weeks of infection. After that, the accuracy falls off like a cliff. So we look at anaplasmosis. No way to test this because anaplasmosis is a reaction. It's not a type of bacteria. And the reaction, you can see all the pink granule types of things. That's what anaplasmosis does. It causes these granular types of inflammatory deposits in different cells and different tissues, and it makes them so they're totally dysfunctional. So anaplasmosis is more of a reaction.